Hi guys.
Hi there.
We are here tonight,
This evening.
creepy, to film another True Hollywood Thursday. And that is how it's done, ladies and gentlemen. That is exactly how it is done. And we are here tonight to discuss a very famous rock star.
Very famous rock star.
This was requested in our last video, which was on a beautiful musician, singer by the name of Selena. So somebody requested this video, and we were like, duh.
Yeah, we had another one in mind,
Absolutely.
and as soon as we saw that one, we're like, yeah, that's happening.
That makes
right
more
now.
sense. So, who'd we choose?
The legend, the
One, the only.
the king of grunge, you might say,
Oh yeah.
Mr. Kurt Cobain.
He is an absolutely fascinating human being, by the way.
Oh my gosh, just the amount.
I had no idea. Like, I will admit, like, I am not an all-out freaking Nirvana fan.
No.
Like, not super crazy. I do have some of their songs on my running playlists and things like that.
Oh yeah, no, everybody loves Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Obviously.
But, like, I wouldn't say I was a die-hard Nirvana fan.
No.
You know.
Me either.
So, Kurt Cobain was born on February 20th of 1967 in Aberdeen, Washington.
He was born to his parents, Donald and Wendy.
Yes. By all accounts, they were a loving family. Wendy worked as a waitress and Donald was a mechanic in a service shop. So I'm assuming that means like a gas station that also has mechanics.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
There were a lot of references I saw to his family saying that they were a very musically inclined family. Maybe not necessarily his immediate family.
Like aunts and uncles, though, were in bands.
He had aunts and uncles in bands, a great uncle that was in a band.
I did see that his mom sang a lot with him when he was growing up.
He was also a very artistically inclined child.
Yes, his grandpa actually told the story, and he said he always knew that Kurt was going to make something of himself, but he thought it would be with his drawing. And he told a story about how he came to his house with a picture he had drawn of one of his favorite cartoon characters, and his grandpa said, "You didn't do that, you traced it." And so he was able to draw his favorite cartoon characters within like seconds. And they looked really cool. If I can find some pictures of his little drawings, I'll put them in because they were really cool looking.
Really good.
Yeah, and he was like a tiny child at this point.
Yes, he was. So he had that artistic inclination.
Yes, he did.
Some of his favorite characters to draw were like the creature from the Black Lagoon and Donald Duck. He also showed an interest in music early on.
Super early on. It said that he was singing at 2.
Playing the guitar, or playing piano, excuse me, and singing.
Yes.
By the age of 4.
Yeah, at the age of 4, he wrote a song about a trip to the park.
Yeah.
That's adorable. Absolutely adorable. Although his grandpa also said that if he picked up an instrument, he assumed it would be drums because he was constantly banging on pots and pans as like makeshift drums. But, you know, he'd never foresaw the guitar.
Oh yeah, I saw it in a video about, like, some of his neighbors were saying that he did have, like, as a kid he had drumsticks and stuff, and they would see him walking around and he would bang on trash cans, bang on the fence post, bang on whatever he could bang those drumsticks on.
So clearly he should have been a drummer, right?
He should have been a drummer. But no. He was also into as a child, he was into some pretty interesting music. The Ramones, ELO.
The Beatles I saw.
Uh-huh.
But what kid of that age wasn't in that day and time?
In the 70s. 60s, 70s. So, unfortunately for him, his parents did divorce.
They did divorce, yes.
When he was 9 years old. And now his mom will say that she saw that it had a pretty serious, like, impact on him emotionally. And even he will say that. Because he went from being what was described as a happy,
kind, carefree, caring,
sensitive, showing care child to very withdrawn.
Very defiant was the word I saw that described him
And
after the divorce. And I read a quote from him where he kind of talked about that and how much it affected him, in that he basically said that he was ashamed of his parents for getting a divorce. He was ashamed that he no longer had that traditional family.
That's all he wanted.
Yeah, that's what he really wanted, was to have his, mother, father, and he was their baby. And like he felt like he couldn't face his friends at school afterwards. Like that's some pretty intense emotion for a 9-year-old to feel.
His father, who interestingly enough had actually promised him that he would never remarry.
Yeah, because Kurt kind of became the center of his attention after
Yes.
his parents divorced. I saw that he had moved in with his father full time. They had split custody at first, but because he missed his dad so much, he moved in with him full time. And apparently his dad had an easier time dealing with his change in personality.
Yes.
And so he moved in with his father full time, and he felt like he was the center of his world, and he kind of regained back some of his happiness. They spent time fishing, they spent time camping, they loved being outdoors together. And so his father had promised him he wouldn't remarry after the divorce, and then
He did, and he remarried a young woman by the name of Jenny Westaby, who actually, based off what I read,
was a lovely woman.
she and Kurt got along relatively well.
Yes, in the beginning.
In the very beginning, until Jenny and his father, Donald, had their own child
Yes.
together. They had a son. And he was so accustomed to being the only son.
Which is super strange because Jenny had 2 kids of her own. She had a little girl and she had a little boy.
But he was his daughter, or his father's only
Yeah.
son. And so he eventually began to resent his stepmother.
Yes.
And his behavior got out of control.
I saw that his childhood friends, said that he essentially terrorized his step siblings.
It was reported that he was also he kind of turned into a bully at school.
Yeah, and he got into a lot of trouble, so his stepmom put him into therapy for that.
Now, one of the weird things that I saw was that the therapist actually thought that it would be better for him and healthier for him, which I mean, I guess you could say that for all kids, just depending on the actual environment and what's going on in the background, for him to be in just a single family environment.
So one parent would get custody essentially.
Well, what I read was that the parents attempted a reconciliation, but it failed.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't see that they attempted a reconciliation. I saw that basically all the family members were trying to get them to reconcile, but it wasn't going to happen. So, I mean, that would be weird though. Like, how do you tell your new wife, like, by the way, I got to try to get back together with my ex-wife,
For the sake of my son.
Yeah.
So, in June of, I think it was 1979, his mother actually granted his father full custody.
Yeah, she had a really hard time dealing with...
She was dealing with domestic
rebellion.
abuse as
Yeah.
well. Her boyfriend was abusive.
She started dating again, too, after the divorce, but, she didn't promise Kurt anything. So, but he witnessed her get her arm broken by this boyfriend.
She wouldn't press charges.
Would not, and she stayed committed to her relationship. And it's just like, honey...
Not good.
Number one, like, for your safety, of course, but look at what you're doing in front of your child. That's traumatizing.
You can allow them to experience something like that. So, he eventually became too rebellious for his father to deal with.
Yes, and so...
His father actually had him living with friends and other family members.
Yes, he actually lived with... this one kind of surprised me.
Me too. I know exactly what you're about to say. That one shocked me.
His name was Jesse Reed. His father's name was Dave Reed. And they were a devout Christian family.
And Kurt became a devout
Christian
while living with them.
Yes, attended church regularly. He was very into, his faith. And while religion would play like a major role in his life, he did eventually renounce Christianity.
But one of the other things that I saw, speaking of slaps to the face, was that he was kind of forced into sports. He was actually a very athletic, a natural athlete. Based off of what I've read. He was actually a very, natural athlete, so he was very good at wrestling and very good at Little League.
This is petty to a degree.
As, because he didn't want to do it, but his dad made him do it. So as a big, F you to his dad, he would get pinned in wrestling on purpose. He would strike out on purpose, and that was just to upset his dad.
Oh, yeah. No, he was, his dad would just make him play these sports, and he would just do terrible at them just because. And actually, it seemed like that was kind of a theme for Kurt, is he's naturally good at these things. He was really intelligent, but he was, other than art and music, he wasn't doing very well in school, which surprised everybody because he's extremely intelligent. He was so smart, and they were like, everybody knew he was smart. He was just didn't feel like doing it.
He just, you know what, that's fairly common, I think, in people
For really
who are
smart people?
very intelligent.
Yeah.
They just don't want to do it, so they don't.
Yeah.
He actually during school befriended a gay student.
I saw this.
Which was weird because
I
just a
didn't know
second
how
ago
I
they said
felt.
he was a bully.
I don't know how I felt about this.
I'm not sure either, but I thought it was kind of interesting because later on in life, some of the shows that they would play, things, they kind of, I don't know that it made up for this necessarily. I think he had good intentions, but because he was he was young, he didn't really understand what he was doing. So he befriended a gay student who was, you know, obviously being made fun of, bullied, and things like that because he was gay. Now, what ended up happening was because he befriended this student, Kurt was assumed to be gay by bullies.
Yes, he was. So he was kind of targeted, but at the same time, he said that
People would
everybody
just leave him alone.
assuming that he was gay meant that they would leave him alone, and he really had already started hating people.
Yes.
Just because of everything he was dealing with at home and dealing with his step siblings and all of that, he just started hating people. He wanted to be left alone, which was weird because I watched a video with all of his friends, like a documentary where they all spoke about him, and he was actually really popular. Like, people really liked him, and all he wanted was to be left alone.
I mean, that doesn't really surprise me,
No,
though,
not
based
really.
off of, you know, what we know. His friend did at one point, because the rumors were going around that he was also gay, his friend did at one point attempt to kiss him, and he backed off from his friend and just told him that he wasn't gay, but he was going to continue being his friend, so he handled that fairly well.
Yeah.
But he was also quoted as saying, this was later on in life, that in spirit he could possibly be gay.
And
Or
then
maybe even bisexual.
Yeah, he might potentially be bisexual.
Oh, there was a really great quote from him about this whole situation also.
What was that?
And it was, "I'm not gay, although I wish I were, just to piss off the homophobes."
Oh yeah, I like that.
Now, going back to his artistry, he did a lot of art in high school.
Yes, he did.
However, apparently that art was highly inappropriate.
Oh yeah,
It didn't go into details for what the drawings looked like.
But you can only imagine, and I'm gonna see if I can find anything online because
He did pictures of Michael Jackson, Ronald Reagan, things like that. And they were all determined to be inappropriate.
Far too inappropriate to hang up on the school walls.
Yes.
Like, you can only imagine. And maybe what I'm imagining is way worse than what he actually did.
So there was some, like, at this point in time when he started getting into high school, there was some conflicting information that I found about what his actual first, like, I mean, and maybe because he's a musician, that's why this is a big deal and that's why people want to talk about it, what his actual first concert was. I read that it was the band the Melvins.
Yes.
But that also it could have been Sammy Hagar and Quarterflash.
I don't know that. I know Sammy Hagar, obviously.
I don't know
that.
Mm-hmm.
But the Melvins, actually, I think maybe Sammy Hagar was kind of like his first as a child, because like that was from like his parents.
Oh yeah, it said
and the
83.
Melvins were friends of his in high school.
Right.
It was a band that really got him started in the punk scene.
They were apparently
actually
pretty big in that punk scene too.
Yeah, they were huge. They became a huge part of the beginnings of Nirvana's success in his future.
Mm-hmm.
Be yeah, so they basically became his mentors, and he befriended, I think he was the lead singer of the band in high school. And it was kind of like in high school when he started really exploring the punk scene to just kind of escape everything that was going on, or everything that he kind of perceived to be all the negative in his life.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he was going to a bunch of punk rock shows in Seattle.
Yes, he was.
Then in the 10th grade, well, it said the second year of high school, but I take that as the 10th grade.
So do I.
He moved in with his mom.
Yes, he moved in with his mom, and this I found really funny, and I don't know if you found this too. I read that he had dropped out of high school 2 weeks before his senior year, or 2 weeks before his graduation, when he realized that he could not graduate. He didn't have good enough credits.
Mm-hmm.
But in the documentary that I watched that had his friends from high school, they said he dropped out in the 10th grade.
I saw 10th grade.
but did you see the reason why? This is amazing. I thought it was kind of funny and also kind of shitty too at the same time. He was trying to convince the high school administration that he was mentally handicapped so he could go to special ed classes and skate through high school and basically get a free diploma. Like,
here's the deal. Them smart people are really good at manipulating the system. Or
but
at least
he knew it wouldn't work. Like, it wasn't working, so he ended up dropping out in 10th grade.
That's what I saw.
So I'm not sure which is true.
I don't know. I saw
But-
10th grade, but then I also saw something about not having enough credits to graduate. So, either one can work. We noticed there's a lot of conflicting information on him.
Yeah, that was actually something we were texting about earlier, and we think there's a lot of stuff that
He's
we
a
think...
super private person.
Yeah, he may have... Because there are some things that he kind of played up about himself that weren't necessarily true, so maybe, like, some of these things were helped on by him, like falsehoods, but helped on by him to kind of create a legend around himself almost. I would think.
Maybe. Like, for example, his mom did kick him out.
Yes, at the age of 17,
Yes.
he was kicked out, and it was a fight over him not having a job and being a high school dropout with no job.
So he would talk about the fact that he was staying with friends, that he was homeless, that he was sleeping under a bridge right next to the, let me make sure I get this right, Wishkah River.
Yeah.
However,
so he was
later on.
he was friends with Novoselic. He's the bass player for Nirvana.
Yes.
And he was friends with him in high school. They were friends in high school, and he said it's absolutely not true. That
did
Kurt
not.
never lived under a bridge. That it was too muddy for him to be under there. He may have to hang out there for several hours because he
Yeah.
also used to sneak back into his mom's basement after she kicked him out. So he would have to wait until his stepdad left. But he never actually lived under a bridge.
Yeah, he was like, there was no way. That water, the tide's too high. Didn't happen.
Way too high.
One little interesting tidbit that I found was that in 1986, you probably found this, but I loved it. I laughed. They formed a band by the name of Fecal Matter.
Yeah, I
love
saw
that.
that. That was awesome. And I actually, part of my interest in Kurt Cobain came from, I listened to a podcast about him, and it was the Disgraceland podcast, and it's such a good podcast, but like the way that guy told his story was so fascinating, and like I never knew like how interesting Kurt Cobain was. Like I knew who he was, but
Obviously, everybody knew who he was.
yeah.
Now, in 1986, he actually moved into an apartment, and he worked at the Polynesian Resort to pay that rent while he was also still attempting to pursue music.
Yes.
Um,
He was also during that time traveling quite often to Olympia, which was kind of like the, I guess,
The
more
hub?
liberal area of
Oh.
town. It had the college, it had it had like sort of a punk scene, which was what he was really getting into. And so he was trying to head out there to go see punk shows as often as he could.
and then in Olympia, he actually met a young lady by the name of Tracy Mirander.
Tracy Miranda.
That was his girlfriend.
Yes.
During that period of time.
They fell head over heels. Basically, he moved into her apartment in Olympia, I saw, and she supported him while he pursued his music.
Yeah, she worked. Where did she work?
She worked at the cafeteria, I think it said.
Of
in
a
the-
hospital, right? Or something?
I think a hospital or the airport. I think it was the airport. Yeah, it was the airport. And it said that sometimes because they were so strapped for money because Kurt eventually was no longer working, he was just focusing on his art.
Yep.
And she was paying everything. She was paying all of their bills. She was paying all of their food. She was doing all of the cleaning. Like, this poor
That's
girl, like, that's commitment, but girl.
Yeah, no, that is kind of what put a pretty huge strain
Yeah.
on their relationship. She always wanted him to get a job. They would constantly argue about stuff. So he ended up actually writing a song about her that was included in one of the later albums, called "About a Girl," and she didn't know that song was written about her until years after he had passed away.
Okay, so Kurt started really taking his music seriously instead of finding an actual job to help Tracy out financially with their, their bills and everything. And he and Novoselic started an early version of Nirvana called Bliss. And then they became Nirvana in 1987. But the thing about them is they did not have a set drummer. So they went through like 5 drummers over the course until they started finding people who had some longevity. But they were discovered during this time. So Kurt and Novoselic wanted to they wanted to record a demo. And so they had called up a local recording studio and asked how much time would $152 buy them. And the guy was like, I don't know, like 5 hours. And so they had to go in and they had to cut this demo. And the only reason the guy was willing to give them a break on the price was because the guy who was the drummer for the Melvins actually came with them. And the man who owned the recording studio was a big Melvins fan. Like he knew.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And so he kind of gave him a cut on the price. And he said he billed them for 5 hours, but it was actually closer to 9 that they were there. And that demo made its way into the hands of a local sort of like underground record label called Sub Pop. And that is where they got their big break, and that is where they sort of joined up with their actual drummer who would stay with them for a few years, named Chad Channing.
Chad Channing.
Chad Channing, yes.
I don't know, what I read was they settled on him, so I was like, was he not that good? I don't know. I mean, I know who I think of.
Years.
I know, but the word settled, you know? When I think of Nirvana and I think of their drummer, I know exactly who pops into my head.
Oh yeah, everybody does.
So they actually ended up recording their first studio, and I think it was just an EP, but it was Bleach.
And that album was an underground music scene hit. It sold 30,000 copies, which is huge for indie. Like, that's enormous. They were starting to play sellout shows where before they would be lucky if they weren't booed off the stage, because where they were playing, they kept calling them rednecks, but it was essentially like these people weren't necessarily into punk and they were showing up to play at these bars, you know, and they were being booed off of the stage.
Yeah.
And so they were showing up to sell out shows, and this is kind of when Kurt was starting to really feel the pressures, and like he had already been super like unhealthy. He had like chronic bronchitis, he had major stomach issues that wouldn't be successfully treated until much later like in his life. And they set off on, you know, a European tour, which was hard for him. Like they were popular now, and they were touring with a group called Tad, and it was very stressful for him. Like the lead singer was like a 300-pound former butcher who was like wild, and it was really stressful because he did not like the overwhelming feeling of fame. He didn't like it, but people were
and that was a
starting to
pretty
know him.
consistent thing for him. He
Yeah,
never
he hated
liked
being
that.
famous. He wanted to be famous, but he hated what came with it. And towards the end of the tour, he actually had a nervous breakdown on stage where the songs weren't sounding like he thought they should. So he just started breaking shit, climbed on top of a 30-foot speaker, and threatened to kill himself.
What the fuck?
Yeah. And I watched the video of him thrashing around and smashing everything in sight, and I was just like, holy shit. And while he was doing this, he was using drugs fairly significantly, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was using, I'm not sure when he got into heroin. I'd seen it a bunch that it came with Courtney Love later on in life. Or also, and he has also said that he was using heroin, but people said it was probably just like opiates, like pills. Basically, not necessarily injectable heroin. So, like, he did not handle it well at all, this whole, like, becoming famous, his success, but that's all he wanted, so it's kind of like a double-ended sword, you know?
It really was. Well, obviously, we know that his relationship with Miss Tracy did not last.
No, it didn't. The strains of money, because while they were touring, they weren't making much money. The touring, being away from each other for so long, they did eventually break up after 3 years together.
Yes. So then he actually met a woman by the name of Toby Vale.
Yes, she was the drummer for I think it was Punk Girl, and it's GRRRL, something like that. Band called Bikini Kill.
Yep.
Interesting.
Very interesting name.
Yeah.
His initial reaction, I guess, to meeting her was kind of insane. He had said he was filled with so much anxiety, so much just like pressure, and he was so infatuated with her that upon actually first meeting her, he puked.
Yeah, he puked.
Which later, actually, is kind of referenced in the song Aneurysm when he sings the part, I love you so much it makes me sick.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, I saw that. He was obsessed with her, basically. Yeah. He became thoroughly, like, he fell hard, he fell fast, and, they didn't actually last for more than a couple months, and he fell into a seriously deep depression.
So another interesting thing I saw, so their relationship inspired a lot of the lyrics for the songs that were on Nevermind. So, and this one was something that I saw on Spotify, not on anything that I had seen, because again, you know, Smells Like Teen Spirit is going to be on my playlist for running. It's that's it. Spotify tells you about lyrics and stuff like that and gives you tidbits and facts. That the title actually came from, like, one of his ex-girlfriend's friends had spray painted Kurt Smells Like Teen Spirit. He initially did not realize that that was a deodorant.
Yeah, he thought that was like a revolution, like a revolutionary slogan, like, you know, call to action, teen spirit. So he didn't know until like months after the song came out.
Yep, and so that's where that title actually came from.
Yeah.
And he had no idea that it was deodorant.
Which I think, in a way, I feel like it's kind of adorable.
It is a little cute.
Yeah.
I do like that. I think it's funny. So, yeah.
Okay. In 1991, Chad Channing was replaced by a little drummer guy somebody may have heard of.
Have you ever heard of this guy?
Dave Grohl.
I mean, little, you know,
unknown. Like unknown drummer, Dave Grohl. They were then quickly afterwards signed with DGC Records, a major label, and they released a little record album
called Nevermind.
And that is actually where, you know, that's where the hit song Smells Like Teen Spirit comes from.
God, that is seriously, like, I just have to say this. I had it on my playlist for the longest time, and then I finally started paying attention to those lyric things. The lyrics on that song are really interesting. So, like...
Give us an example.
When you, here we are now, entertain us. And then he goes, a mulatto, an albino, a mosquito, my libido.
Okay, bro.
I mean, but he also was quoted as saying at one point that people find his lyrics to be so profound, just so amazingly profound. And he's like, a lot of the times I write my lyrics half or kind of half-ass them, or I do them last minute because I'm just pretty lazy. Yeah. He's like, so y'all look into my lyrics too much.
A lot of smart people tend to be super lazy. And at this time, too, when Nevermind was released, grunge was becoming really, like, a super popular music. It was becoming so very popular with, you know, the youth of America.
Correct.
And the youth of the world, honestly. And he eventually... He was named, basically, the spokesperson for Generation X, and he hated it.
Yes, he was a spokesperson, and Nirvana was the band.
Yes.
That represented Generation X.
That album sold over 30 million copies worldwide, and actually knocked Michael Jackson, I think it was the Billboard Music chart for the #1 album. Like, that's a humongous
thing. You know, Michael Jackson out of first place, bro. Like, that's big.
That's the king of pop, being taken out by arguably the king of grunge.
Now, obviously, along with this kind of fame, they had started to develop new fans as well. Yes. Not just their traditional fans, but they had some new fans. And he was actually fairly resentful because a lot of those fans did not acknowledge or essentially were ignorant to or chose to ignore the band's very political and social views, because they were very open about those sorts of things. And they were, if you read about it, they were very liberal, very democratic leaning. Yeah, that's exactly how they felt. To the point to where they were anti-sexist, racist, and homophobic. And then they played at a gay rights rally
Nice.
in 1992 to oppose a ballot measure that would have directed, listen to this, it would have directed schools to teach that homosexuality was abnormal, wrong, and perverse.
This was in the 1990s.
Correct. In the 90s.
That's not that long ago.
1992.
That's horrifying.
1992. How horrible is that? They were also very vocally pro-choice. They did the Rock for Choice campaign, which actually led to them receiving a lot of death threats.
I'm sure.
It led to them, somebody even said that they would shoot him at a concert on stage.
Oh my God.
Yep. Like they were gonna kill him dead.
So soon after Nevermind came out and Kurt was enjoying the success. I say enjoying, but he never really enjoyed his success. He met
A woman by the name of Courtney Love,
the lead singer of a band called Hole.
yes. Now, and like I thought it was kind of weird. Again, the such inconsistencies. I saw 3 dates for when they had met.
Yeah, I didn't see
3.
any dates, so I didn't put any dates.
So the one that I wrote down is January 12th of 1990, and they met in a nightclub in Portland. It said she hit on him, she was making advances, he was really resistant. And that was kind of regular for the very early interactions between Courtney Love and Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, I saw that she basically sat on his lap the first night that they met. And see, what I saw was that they actually were inseparable after that. After that very first night.
Oh, no, because it said that he was, a quote from him, said that, so he would break off dates, he ignored her, and he was just super unsure about getting involved in a relationship. It said, his quote is, "I was determined to be a bachelor for a few months, but I knew that I liked Courtney so much right away, that it was really a hard struggle to stay away from her for so many months. He tried to stay away, but
They were inseparable.
they were inseparable. She liked him, he liked her, and in late 1991, they were finally officially together. And the weirdest sentence in the world was that they were officially together and they had a really great bond over drug use.
Yes.
Holy fuck.
Although in their defense, they also had a bond over their terrible childhoods. Courtney had a very similar childhood where she was kind of like, you know, back and forth, being shipped off to this person's house to be taken care of. So she had a shitty childhood too. So they bonded over that as well.
All right.
And their love of heroin.
And their love of heroin. So, in between, or later on, February 24th of 1992, if we're going to jump forward a touch, she and Kurt were married at Waikiki Beach in Hawaii
Yes, they were.
after their Pacific Rim tour for Nirvana.
And why is that?
She was prego.
She was preggo with his baby. And then actually, to jump back just about a month before he got, they got married, this was kind of when people started realizing how bad his drug use had started to get.
Yes.
He was set to perform, Nirvana was set to perform on Saturday Night Live. He loved that show and he was so nervous.
Mm-hmm. Can you believe that?
Basically, nobody knows that he actually did it, but there was a suspicion that he had shot up because during a photo shoot that he had, or a photo call, he could barely keep his eyes open. He was nodding off. He could barely stand. And just before he went on to perform, he was puking his guts out.
Oh, yeah,
He did actually perform and killed it, apparently. And then
It's probably like a switch gets flipped.
yeah, probably like okay, I gotta get this done. And he ended up skipping the after party that they always have for the stars of SNL and the musical guests. And he ended up ODing that night on heroin.
Holy fuck.
Courtney was the one who found him. She revived him, and that was just kind of like people's first real taste of holy shit, he's really got a problem. And she actually later, like not even that long afterwards, and I think just before they got married, found out she was pregnant. And so they were really determined to get clean. She was very motivated to get clean, because she needed to be healthy for the baby.
Right.
He had a bit of a harder time with it though. So he ended up basically taking himself during her last few weeks of pregnancy, and I would I don't know how she didn't kill him. The last few weeks of pregnancy, he took himself to Cedar Sinai and put himself in a 60-day detox program. She went into labor a few weeks later, so he's still in the middle of his detox. And she said that she actually went down to the detox center and dragged his half-conscious ass into the labor and delivery.
Nice.
To make him be there for the birth of his baby.
Good for her.
Yeah, I kind of applaud that.
Although, she was quoted by Vanity Fair. However, she says Vanity Fair misquoted her as saying that she did do heroin while she was pregnant.
Yeah, there was actually a news article that came out just afterwards. The baby was born healthy, by all accounts.
Frances Bean Cobain. Born August 18th of 1992.
Yes, she was born healthy, so no reason to assume that she had done any drugs during her pregnancy, other than an article came out just afterwards, and seemingly both parents were sober, baby was healthy. An article came out that said
they were doing drugs.
They were doing drugs during the pregnancy.
Yes.
And social services got involved and ended up taking the baby. They took Frances Bean.
Mm-hmm.
Kurt took that real hard.
Yes.
Because he was head over heels, absolutely in love with his child, crazy about her. He was, I saw in an interview with him, he talked about years before he would have said how selfish it was to bring a child into this world. It's such a terrible place to be. But once you fall in love, like you can't go back. Like that's your baby, that you know. And so he basically admitted that he was wrong. Like, hey, I relate. I didn't want kids until I had Alice. After social services took the baby, Kurt obviously didn't take that very well at all. He ended up relapsing, and he overdosed again. He was revived again, and basically, it was kind of like a get clean or you're never going to see your kid again type situation. So they worked really hard, and they basically proved that there was no drug use in the house with the baby, and they regained custody of the child.
Nice.
And I think around the same time, Kurt's third album, In Utero, came out. Or I should say Nirvana's third album. It was also at this time that Kurt actually performed an MTV Unplugged session, which is basically like a
Is
it's
that
an acoustic.
the one with the guitar?
Yeah.
That caused so much controversy, like just a little while ago.
I think so.
Right.
With Frances Bean's ex or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was actually hailed as the greatest performance of his life to date. It was very raw and emotional, and because it was all
that
acoustic.
coming from him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've all heard his voice. It's very emotional, but can you imagine it cut down to just acoustic? And it's just him strumming on a guitar, singing those songs that, people were apparently, that didn't have as much depth as we all kind of thought that they did, because they did have, really beautiful lyrics.
Yeah.
But, that was hailed as his most amazing performance.
I think that was right around the time where he was quoted as saying that he hopes to one day be taken seriously as a musician and not just a punk rocker.
Yeah,
he wanted to be able to sit down with an
Johnny
acoustic
Cash.
guitar with Johnny Cash and sing songs and have everyone understand that he is in fact a musician.
Yes. And it was kind of around this time when In Utero came out that his downward spiral started to sort of take over. He began using heroin again, and I believe Courtney also began using heroin again, so much for being clean. And it was also at this time, heroin was taking over his life, but he was sent on a European tour to promote and to, songs from In Utero.
Yep. And then, on a stopover in Munich, Germany, he actually got really sick.
Yes, he did.
He had some severe bronchitis, severe laryngitis, and he was advised to fly to Rome for treatment. Now, Courtney flew to Rome to meet him and be there for him during his treatment, where he spent 4 days in Rome.
Yes, he did.
Now, part of that was an accidental overdose. An accidental overdose is what it was called. Of, I believe it was champagne and Rohypnol.
Yes, and actually that was Courtney's prescription apparently. What she had said happened was that they had a nice romantic dinner and they went back to the room and, you know, shot up, and she got too messed up to have sex. And he got mad about that.
Which,
Okay.
alright. There's a lot more once we start getting into the conspiracy portion of this video that we're
Yeah.
going to talk about with that Rome trip.
Dude.
But after 5 days in the hospital, he was released and he went home to Seattle.
Yes. Because he was basically found in a coma, and he was in a coma for
Yes.
20 hours.
Yeah. It was reported all over the news that he was found comatose.
Or dead. Some news sites actually, or some news,
Yeah.
they didn't have websites back then, I would imagine, but some news sites, places actually reported that he was dead.
Yeah.
So fans were already mourning him. Crazy.
So, Courtney Love is actually reported as saying that that was a suicide attempt, number one.
Yes.
That was the first time he attempted. Then, on March 18th, Courtney called the police stating that he was in fact suicidal, that he had locked himself in a room
With the gun.
with guns and bottles of pills. So the police showed up and they confiscated the guns.
Because he did have guns and pills. He insisted that he was not suicidal.
Yes, he did. But they were insistent they took the guns.
Yes.
Which, okay, yeah,
Good plan.
makes
Good
sense.
plan, guys. Absolutely.
March
good plan.
25th, an intervention was staged by Courtney for him.
Yes.
It included 10 of his friends, some music
Yes.
some record execs, and Courtney.
And she had banned him from ever using drugs again after the Rome incident, according to her. And he didn't listen, obviously. So he did not take to this intervention well.
Not at first, no. It took all day. But eventually, he agreed
Yes.
to go to detox.
Courtney hounded him a bit, and, you know, he agreed to go.
And he went to a place in LA called Exodus Recovery Center. However, they are reported as saying that they had no clue about his suicidal past.
Yes.
And what they would see was they would see friends come to visit him. He seemed happy. Everything was going well. It looked like he was on the right path.
Yes.
His daughter showed up. He played with his daughter.
Which seems like a lot, because he was only there for 2 days.
Yes. But on a sadder note, that was actually the last time that he would ever play with his daughter, that he'd ever interact with his child, because we all kind of know what is about to happen here in the next couple of days. He broke out of the rehab center.
Yes, he went out for a cigarette.
He hopped
and
the 6-foot fence.
Yep, and he just took
left.
off. He fled to...
He took a
Home?
taxi. He went to Seattle. He sat on the plane to Seattle next to Duff McKagan of Guns N' Roses.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, there was kind of a little rivalry or a little feud between him and Axl Rose, right?
Yeah, so it was said that he didn't like the people from Guns N' Roses, but it was more specifically Axl Rose that he didn't like.
Yeah.
And this Duff was said that he seemed happy, but that all of his instincts were that something was wrong with him.
Yeah.
Couldn't put his finger on it though. Now, this was April 1st, I think, because on April 2nd and 3rd, he was spotted all around Seattle. People were seeing him.
He was seeing his friends. Apparently, he was also doing quite a bit of drugs.
Yes.
Is what I saw. And
By April 3rd, Courtney, who was on tour with Hole in England,
yes,
hired a private investigator, Tom Grant, to track him down. After April 3rd, he was not seen again.
no,
Tom Grant was searching for him. That's actually one of the documentaries I watched. Was more specific to his experiences. It was called a docudrama, so they had actors playing out parts, but they had the real people being interviewed in between. And he was explaining what they were doing and everything that he experienced. And it looked like, based off this docudrama, he was all over Seattle in his house trying to find him. The one place he didn't look was this place they called the Green Room, which was a room over the garage. Now, because he had not been seen since the 3rd, by April 7th, Nirvana had officially pulled out of Lollapalooza,
yes,
which sparked rumors that they were breaking up. On April 8th, an electrician went in to install a security system in his home. They went into the room above the garage, And that is where they saw through the French doors, which were locked by a stool. There was a stool in front of them. They saw a body, which initially they said it could have been a mannequin, it could have been anything, until they saw the blood coming out of his ear.
Yes.
And then he also saw the shotgun. A note was found near the body, and the body was confirmed to be Kurt. They knew who it was when they saw him. The note was actually written to his childhood imaginary friend, Badoda?
See, he had Nirvana. He got that name from Buddhism.
Boda.
Boda or Buddha.
Buddha. But it's spelled different.
Boodah, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So, so he was really into Buddhism. So I'm wondering if it might have been Buddha or Boda. I don't know. But, you know.
So the police were called. Actually, at one point, I saw in one of the docudrama that somebody called the radio station.
Really?
Yeah, they said that they went out and they called the radio station and like, hey, look, we found a body here. It's at Kurt Cobain's house. We're pretty sure this is Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
Now, it had been a few days, so the estimated date of death is April 5th.
April 5th, they estimated that he died. He was found on April 8th.
Yes.
It was a gunshot wound through the mouth. And this we'll also get more into in a second, but three times the lethal dose
Of
heroin in his system.
Mixed with diazepam.
We'll get into it in a minute.
He was age 27 when he passed away.
He was.
There was a vigil held for him on April 10th.
Yes.
7,000 people showed up to the Seattle Center to say goodbye to this
Icon.
grunge rock god, essentially.
Yeah,
he was the guy.
And pre-recorded messages from Novoselic were played, and also Courtney Love, and then I believe she actually, closer towards the end, read out his suicide note. But now, if none of the conspiracy theories are true, I am behind you 100%, girlfriend. She ripped his ass to shreds while reading it. It was talk about how he didn't want to be a rock star anymore. Then she would be like, then fucking stop being a rock star, Kurt. It's that easy. As she's sobbing and she's reading this note. And it was just like, if none of those conspiracy theories are true, I'm with you, honey. Like, he left you, he left your kid, his brand new baby girl.
Let's get into some of those things though.
Okay.
Seattle police will report, as of even today, they get at least one request per week to reopen the Kurt Cobain case because there's a small group of people who have dived headfirst into this and trying to weed through some of the inconsistencies, to include Tom Grant.
Tom Grant, her private investigator,
who actually eventually accused her of murder. Just saying, not saying, just saying. Now, some of them are crazy. Yeah. Now, so I'm sorry. I'm super pumped because I watched the whole docudrama Soaked in Bleach. I watched it. It was crazy.
Link it below. I think they have it on YouTube either for $3.99 or free. I think there's a free one.
I found a free one.
Yeah,
that I was watching. I'm paying for that.
So what I saw that basically started off this theory was that Kurt was going to divorce her. In Rome, he thought she was cheating on him, and that I got from the Disgraceland podcast. Was that he thought that she was cheating on him, and that could have been a reason for his suicide attempt in Rome, or it could have been a reason for her to drug him because he told her he was leaving her. She would be cut out of his will. If anything happened to him, she wouldn't get a dime if they got divorced. And I listened to recordings of her acknowledging that she needed to get the meanest motherfucking divorce lawyer possible. Because she knew she was headed for divorce.
She acknowledged the fact that Tom Grant recorded all of his conversations with her because he said immediately red flags all over the place when she hired him. Dogs, great dogs, love them. In that, she admitted that he was going to divorce her and that he had said in Rome he was leaving her. Interesting. But there is kind of there is the other side of that in that, why'd she wait a month to kill him then?
You know?
All right. So, the reason why this case is still going super strong is because fans are really pushing and pushing and pushing. In 2014, they developed 4 rolls of film that were never developed because the cops at the time were like, we don't develop film from suicides. You should. You still should.
Absolutely.
But they were never released. But it was stated that they provided clear photos of the crime scene, or the scene, not necessarily the crime scene. Now, conspiracy theories. He had too much in his system, too much heroin, that if he had done that much heroin and that much diazepam, he would not have been able to lift the shotgun to shoot himself in the
Let
face.
alone put away his kit. Because he had, like, they found a neat little cigar box next to him with the syringes, the tie things, and the burnt spoons and everything. He put it all away. Because heroin, and, like, I know from Breaking Bad, that shit's instant. And I don't know how accurate Breaking Bad is, but I imagine it's pretty accurate.
I don't do heroin.
But, you know, I've never done, no, we don't do heroin. So, like, it hits you instantly. You know, so how could he have done it? And also, where the casing for the shell was found, it was found on the opposite side of where they eject. She knows more about guns than I do. Dog, do the casings go to the opposite side of where they eject from?
Goes that.
Girl, I might be a conspiracy theorist.
Girl, me too. One of the questions, but it was kind of easily explained, was why wasn't there, if he had shot himself in the head, why wasn't there that much blood? Well, the medical examiner apparently has shown through the mouth, it's not going to produce as much blood. That's okay. Now, here's where the good one is. This is my favorite one, and it is fucking weird, guys. Courtney Love is reported to have paid a man $50,000 to kill Kurt Cobain. However,
he declined.
And his name was Eldon Hoke. He, however, went on record in an interview to say he knew who killed Kurt Cobain, and that man's name was Alan Wrench. There's an interview of the man confirming that she asked him to do it, and he turned her down. He thought it was a joke, and then he was like, shit, I wish I had done it now. I wish I had known she was serious, but I do know who got the money, and I do know who killed him. His name is Alan Wrench.
What happened to what
Eldon Hoke was killed. Days after he did this interview for this documentary, he was drunk and run over by a fucking train,
y'all.
And then there's also reports that they have, Alan Wrench goes around bragging about the fact that he'll never get in trouble for it. But yeah, he did in fact kill Kurt Cobain. Again, see,
she's all pumped on this.
She's
ready. And they also, Kurt's lawyer actually spoke with the private investigator and explained that she found in Courtney's backpack that she had left at her house practice notes. Practice suicide notes.
There was a test done on the suicide note, and it confirmed, allegedly confirmed, that the last 4 lines of the suicide note were not written in his handwriting, but in someone attempting to do his handwriting.
And prior to those last 4 lines, that wasn't actually a suicide note. It was a goodbye letter. He was thinking about quitting music. He was thinking about leaving Courtney, and he just wanted to get to be in a normal life with his daughter and his family. Yeah. And that's what everybody thinks it is. It was that those last 4 lines were added to make it a suicide note. So, and his attempt in Rome was not called a suicide.
Until she said it was a fucking suicide attempt.
She's pretty sure. I'm still
I have been paying attention to this shit since the 2014 article came out saying we're pushing to get the evidence re-reviewed.
I'm still kind of like, I don't, you never know what's going on in someone's head. A lot of times when people kill themselves, people are like, holy shit. Who would have seen that coming?
Now,
the weird part is that, like, his health was improving. He had these major stomach problems that he had just seen a doctor. He was talking about how the stomach pains were gone. They were finally able to get him on the right prescription to make the stomach pains go away. So that didn't make his health was improving. He was optimistic about his child. He was optimistic about his future. All of his friends said that he was not suicidal as far as they knew.
He was going, if the rumors are true, he was going to divorce his wife. You don't
probably get himself clean.
Yeah, get himself clean, get himself healthier, into a better spot.
My God.
Her PI, Tom Grant, eventually accused her of murder.
Yep.
Her own father accused her of being involved in his death, saying that she was responsible. Some of his family members have come out and said, nah, she did it. However, there will never be enough, because Tom Grant has tried and tried and tried over the course of years. They did an interview with the police chief saying that a lot of those detectives that were involved, one of them ended up quitting, that was involved in the investigation for Kurt Cobain, ended up quitting because it turned out that he had conspired with another cop to return evidence that had been taken from a crime scene and try to replant it. Weird. So, we're not working with, the people with the highest amount of integrity here.
Yeah, and I mean, he was cremated very soon after. I think it said 6 days after. The shotgun was given to Courtney to melt down and destroy.
That was confirmed to be a rumor.
Was it?
The police still have it. Seattle police have confirmed that they actually still
that's
have
cool.
the shotgun.
See?
She did melt down the rest of his guns, though.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, and it just seems like most of his friends and family did accept the fact that it was a suicide.
Most of them did.
Yeah. And they were just kind of like,
me.
They were like, I never knew. I didn't know he was suicidal.
There were so many people that confirmed he was not suicidal that they would have never guessed it.
Yeah. So, on May 31st of 1999, his mother held a final ceremony in Olympia at McLean Creek, and his daughter sprinkled some of his ashes into the creek. Courtney was there, Tracy was there, friends and family were all there for that ceremony, and yeah, they just kind of, celebrated his life and his legacy. To be honest, I really hope she didn't have anything to do with it, because he really did seem to love her. They had kind of a chaotic relationship, but he did seem to love her.
I mean, I don't know, later on in life, his daughter, Frances Bean, her ex-husband accused Courtney of trying to have him killed. Weird.
Girl, what you doing?
Weird.
Stop it.
So, our battery is flashing because we've been talking about Kurt Cobain for over an hour.
It's kind of warm up here too.
Super hot.
Super hot up here.
So, we are going to have to cut it off there, because if not, I will talk for another hour about all these conspiracies.
She's in it, though. She's so in it. I imagine I'm going to have her in my ear for the next couple days talking to me about conspiracies.
Bro, I think she killed him. Allegedly.
I think she might have too. But part of me also says, he was a troubled, artistic, depressed drug addict.
Yeah, that could be it too. I know, but that's what I think happened. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please feel free to give us a thumbs up. Click that subscribe button down below. Click if you haven't done so already, and we will see you guys very, very soon.
Very, very soon.
In the next video.
In the next one, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.